a couple of minutes after 6, and I'd just like to welcome everybody. My name is John Fain, and I've been invited by the City of Maribyrnong to be your independent facilitator for today. So thank you all very much for joining us. And just very briefly, the format is as straightforward as it can be. The acting CEO will speak, the Mayor will answer a few questions, and then we throw it open to you. And your participation is absolutely vital, and that's what we're here for. Now, on the Zoom, if you're not familiar with it, I'll just very quickly run through. If you move your mouse for a moment, as well as seeing all the councillors and me and the other people here, including an expert I'll introduce in a moment, down the bottom in the bar, there's a number of options for you. And one of them on my screen, it's on the very right, and that's where it'll be for most people. It's called Q&A. And you can type in a question there. And if at any stage, even now, if you've got a question that you think the council should address, or you want our expert to address, then you type the question there on the Q&A section, and that'll get fed through to me, and we'll see if we can get through as many of your questions as possible, quite apart from the ones that the councillors all have that undoubtedly have already been to some extent looked at. Before we go too far though, we want to offer our respect to the elders of the lands that we meet on, the Kulin Nation, and through them to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, past, present and emerging. And I would also like to personally express my impatience for a treaty or treaties, a makarata, which the Victorian State Government has committed to a process, and hopefully in our lifetimes we'll get to see that come to fruition, because without it we can't repair some of the damage that's been caused in our past. I'd like to acknowledge first of all the Mayor, Councillor Michael Clarke, and thank you very much for inviting me to be with the community on this occasion. And then the councillors, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Anthony Tran, Councillor Cook Lam, Councillor Bernadette Thomas, Jorge Hojera, Councillor Simon Crawford, Councillor Sarah Carter has joined us. And they're all here not to take over the meeting, but to contribute to the meeting. And they're all on call to answer any specific questions. If you've got a question to address to them individually, that's fine. And we'll of course try and hear from them all as we go through. The Acting Chief Executive, Celia Haddock, will join us in just a moment, but I want to also thank and acknowledge that we have with us Professor Darryl Efron from the Murdoch Children's Institute, who's an expert in the issue that we're raising, the medicinal cannabis issue. And he's available to answer any questions of a medical nature or scientific nature. So the councillors have many skills and many areas of expertise, but medicine and science is not amongst them. So we will defer to him, and he's very generously given us his time for that purpose for the next hour or so. And Professor Efron, we just want to acknowledge that and thank you very much as well. So I hope that makes it clear to everybody what's going on. We should finish by 7 o'clock. We might go over if there's still a lot of questions unanswered. We'll see if we can stretch it a bit, but that's how things are going to go for the course of this first of public consultations. Now, Acting CEO Celia Haddock, if I can hand over to you to set the scene. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. And we are here tonight to look at medicinal cannabis, whether it's an enterprise that you would like the Maribyrnong City Council to look into and develop. Thanks, Kate. So how this came about was at the ordinary council meeting on the 14th of September, council resolved to seek community views on council setting up a business to cultivate, produce and manufacture medicinal cannabis. And there'll be a further report to council in February after all the consultation has been completed on the results of that. Thanks, Kate. The purpose of today's forum, and I think John's gone through this, so I'll just be brief, is really an opportunity for you to ask questions. We've got the Mayor and councillors and Professor Efron here to respond. And if you've got any questions, as John said, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And today is not the only opportunity to have your say. We have a lot of information on Your City, Your Voice. There'll be information coming out in the Maribyrnong Messenger, and we will be giving you until the end of, I think about the 10th of January to respond to us. Thank you, Kate. Medicinal cannabis as a venture has been seen as a way for council to seek alternative revenue, And the big complaint that we get from people is that rates are very high, and we do understand that that is the case. Medicinal cannabis would also provide an opportunity to boost local employment in Maribyrnong, and there'd be likely flow-on impacts in relation to research and development initiatives within the region, and support the health and well-being of those suffering chronic illness, particularly those for whom conventional treatments aren't working. Thanks, Kate. There are a lot of regulations in this area, and some of you will be aware of these as well. So any venture of this nature has to meet the Local Government Act requirements 2020, be consistent with Council's revenue and rating plan, meet the requirements of the local planning scheme, and meet the conditions to obtain a licence and permit from the Office of Drug Control. Thanks, Kate. The proposal itself is an opportunity for the Council to partner with government and private industry, science and experts to establish a business that promises benefits in terms of those points I mentioned earlier. There would be significant hurdles to overcome. So we know this is a long journey. If you tell the Council you want the Council to proceed, it's not something that will happen tomorrow. However, the next steps, assuming if there is community appetite for us to proceed, would be a feasibility study, a risk assessment, and then moving into a full business plan. Thanks, Kate. The feasibility would be the point where the operational model would be considered. So at this point, we certainly haven't considered an operational model. And that could be indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, a range of options there. We'd also be looking at the costs, the timeframes, and the business structure. And only then would Council be able to consider the sites and potential monetary investment. And that feasibility study could be well in excess of $100,000. So we have to prepare that brief, and we would need to put that to tender. So we don't know yet what the price of that will be. Thanks, Kate. So the next steps are for Council. As you know, we're currently seeking to understand if the community's on board with the idea, and we certainly do want to hear your Q&As tonight. A further report to Council, as I said, in February, and then if the idea is supported, Council will embark on that feasibility study, including commercial and legal due diligence and costings. Thanks, Kate. So I'm now going to hand back to John, who's going to get you all to talk. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Celia Haddock. So talking is what it's about. We have an opportunity to thrash out the attitude and to get a toe in the water, a taste of what the community's appetite is for a project of this kind. It's innovative, it's exciting, it's different, it's bold, but what do you make of it? Positives and negatives, risks, opportunities, all of those things. There are many unknowns, and there are questions that at this stage no one will know the answers to, but even then it's important, if you've got a question to which there isn't an immediate answer, you still ask it so that we know what are the sorts of things that are on people's mind, and that way Council can work out where this is likely to go. So we want to start a dialogue. It's not a monologue from Council to community, it's a dialogue between Council and community. So councillors will answer when they can. I'll try and make sure everyone gets a chance to have a say. Put your questions down in the Q&A section, I get it again, at the bottom of the screen, and they'll come through to me. And we may not get through all the questions tonight, but we'll try to make sure we get a representative sample. And I've made it clear that it's important that this isn't just PR, it's not just spin, it's not just, oh, we're only going to take comments that are supportive. If there are critical questions, then they need to be addressed as well. And if we don't get through every question today, as Celia said, your city, your voice is where you'll get an opportunity to continue the discussion beyond. Now, this proposal came, as you've seen, from Councillor Michael Clarke, who put the notice of motion on the table. And it's therefore appropriate to start with the Mayor and ask him exactly where this idea came from and why he thinks it's a good thing to do. Councillor Clarke.
Yeah, thanks, John. And before I commence, I do, on behalf of Council, want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. I shall offer our respects to the elders of these traditional lands and through them to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, past, present and emerging. The idea very much came from discussions that I was having during the August, September, October period of last year. What became really evident to me was that people are hurting financially. Apart from the rates, which we are on the higher end of the rating continuum. So, you know, always thinking about, well, what can we do about that? But what really accelerated that concern was COVID, and looking at the financial impact of COVID on our community, and it being very, very stark to me that really, while we can continue to go back to the community, just as a matter of course, to raise revenue through our rating system, people are finding it hard. So it's incumbent on me, I think, on council to look at alternative revenue sources. So that's where it came from, looking to try and relieve the rate burden, the financial burden on the community.
So why this idea as opposed to any other commercial venture?
What's interesting is that council has to be really careful about the type of business that it gets into. We can't afford to go into a business where we already see, you know, young family, a family, you know, the free enterprise operating in that space already. We wind up undercutting or infringing on the market of those in an established industry. So this is very much what's best perhaps described as a new horizons industry. It's an industry in its infancy, but what we know is that the industry has significant growth potential. And it's that growth potential that forms the heart of why we'd look at this particular industry. So we're not having to worry about competitive neutrality. We're not competing with our constituents. We're looking at an industry that really, in terms of outcomes, is fundamentally positive. You know, we're looking at an industry that will have an impact, hopefully, on rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, palliative care, epilepsy, you know, behavioural disturbance. You know, there are a number of illness conditions or states that this particular industry addresses. So it's an industry that for me is close to my heart. I come from a human services background, and I think that that particular sense resonates with the other councillors as well. So whereas we could go out and we could actually we could put in place a brewery, we could open a pub, but that doesn't necessarily accord with the value system of this council. So a new horizons industry, very strong opportunity for growth, and it's in an area that we think makes a significant impact on the health and well-being of the broader community.
And just finally, how important is the community's view in deciding council's attitude to whether to proceed or not? Given that you've told us it's as much as anything driven by a concern about the narrow financial base of the council going into the future, how important is it, the sort of feedback you get from meetings like this, of which I'm sure there'll be many, how directive will a meeting like this be in deciding whether you proceed or not?
Yeah, look, and I'm very clear about this, and I think the councillors are very clear about this. No councillor was elected to council on a platform of we're going to grow or propose to grow medicinal cannabis. none of us. So we don't have an authority that's been given to us by the electorate. So we have to go back to the electorate to seek their endorsement, to seek their authority to go to the next stage. So community endorsement is absolutely fundamental here, John. And I say that to the community. 5 years ago, we couldn't have done this type of consultation, this level of consultation. So we're lucky. If you like, there's a silver lining from COVID. You know, we're able to engage in a Zoom town hall meeting. So we're able to engage with the community. We want to listen to the community. We will be directed by the community. Like I think you can ask any of the councillors, they will talk about the whole notion of engagement and transparency as being fundamental dimensions to how they want to see council operate. So reconciling this as an idea with the community is core and critical to us.
All right, I'll try and share the love around between the councillors because nearly everyone's here, and we'll defer to Professor Efron if we get a question that requires medical or scientific knowledge in the answer. I see there's 15 questions already waiting. And we'll see how we go. First question is from Mark Vander, and Mayor, I'll direct this to you. There are hundreds of companies much further advanced in medicinal cannabis ventures already, and certainly the experience in North America, it's been an astonishing growth area. Why should council get involved in a venture like this, an area where you have no expertise?
Again, John, it's whilst there may be hundreds of businesses with an interest in the area, and I think that there's more licenses that are sitting there dormant that have been issued but not acted upon. So the size of the business, the size of the number of participants doesn't quite equal the number of licenses that are really out there. First point. Second point is the growth. You know, as has been said, you know, North America, Canada, Amsterdam, Holland, the Netherlands, just to name a couple of jurisdictions. It's there, it's growing. Pre-COVID, 2019, Australia, the business was worth 177 million. The projection for 2025 is 1.5 billion. 2028, it's gone up to 3 billion, in excess of $3 billion. So although there are a number of potential players, there's ample room to actually establish ourselves as a meaningful player. Council's role, like not having expertise, no, we'll buy that in. We've got people who have already indicated an interest in assisting council. So, and we understand that. It's like any industry. At once, and I say this, at one stage years ago, council was in the electricity business, electricity distribution, major utility, core and critical utility. Yet the council was in that business. So being in something that's not beyond roads and rubbish is not new to council. We're able to do this.
All right. Any other councillors, very quickly, if you want to just give me a wave. And obviously we can't get every councillor to answer every question, but if you give me a wave when you want to jump in, and this is a fairly foundational question, I'll try and get to you just very quickly. Anybody? Yes, Councillor Tran.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so in answering that question, I think the other thing we're looking at is that the key point there was there are international private industries that are doing it already. The point is the international. So the thing we're taking out here is the need for tariffs, import taxes and all that stuff. And that really reduces the cost of selling the product. Obviously, if you're a private firm, you want to recoup the money that you've lost when it comes to taxes and tariffs. Whereas if you produce it locally, we're taking that out of the picture, essentially reducing costs for what is already quite an expensive product. So not only are we able to, generate revenue for our community, but we're offering that, hopefully, a cheap alternative to what is already being offered overseas.
All right. question about the council's openness about this. You say you've been working on this and staff have been looking at it for months and there's been a legal opinion already. So how open and upfront really is the council being with the community? How much money has already been spent and how much of council resources have already been put into investigating this venture just to get it even to this stage? And I think implicit in that question, let's not beat around the bush, is you have no mandate for making that commitment so far. So, Mayor, maybe you could address that and I'll see if other councillors want to join in afterwards.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. There was foundation work that actually had to be done for council to actually be able to consider the motion to go forward, to consider the enterprise. So in the first instance, we had to seek legal advice. Are we within the legislation? Does the legislation let us do this? Yes or no? Yes, it does. What's the size of the market out there? What are the market opportunities? Again, that was undertaken by some internal project officers. In terms of overall outlays and expenditure on the venture, so far, I think we've racked up $5,000. It could be slightly more than that, but plus or minus, it's around $5,000. And again, why aren't we spending great swathes of money on this? Because we're not authorised. Like we could do it, and for years, councils in the past have just up and done things with or without community endorsement or support. But given the nature of what we're trying to do, hopefully, if we grow the industry as much as we would like to make a meaningful impact on rates. It really does need the community to be along with us on the journey. Because the risk-reward equation, it's not worth taking a huge risk for a small reward. If you're going to take a risk, you want to do something that's got a decent reward. But let's quickly go. Councillors Thomas, O'Hara, Carter, Crawford. Yes, Councillor Simon Crawford, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just noticed my name as part of this question, so I thought I'd quickly jump in. As the Mayor says, we've spent a few $1,000s on this at this stage. So, I would consider that to be a very small amount of money, considering the potential amounts we're talking, 100,000 plus just for a feasibility study, a business case, and then, most likely millions to actually do the venture if that's where we go. So I think it's important to keep things in perspective and sort of say that, look, that's the whole point of all this consultation is, do we have that mandate? None of us ran for the council elections saying that this is what we're going to do. So it is a very new idea, and it's important that we get that early mandate if we're going to kick on with it. So that's what we're doing now.
All righty. Jacob Goldschlager has asked, with a bit of an introduction, I'm certainly not against the idea, applaud creative thinking from council to build economic sustainability, but are there other councils, local government areas elsewhere in Australia or worldwide that are engaging in this industry that this council could learn from? Because Jacob Goldschlager says being the first mover in this space is inherently more risky. Best practice from others would likely be beneficial, and against the risks of being a first mover, of course, are the advantages of being a first mover to offset that as well. But Councillor Clarke Backers, this is your proposal.
Yeah, again, thanks, John. No council in Australia we're aware of has gotten into the idea of actually producing and manufacturing medicinal cannabis. So yes, it is new, and with that there is a risk. We know that council in northern New South Wales has been involved in facilitating the growing of medicinal cannabis, but not necessarily directly involved in the production themselves. Recognise that, but at the same time, whilst there is a risk, that's where the opportunity lies for us. a market scan again showing us the growth potential. Yes, we can hang back and let others do it for us, but then we're playing catch-up footy in an industry where my anxiety is that it could fill up, and quite simply other whether it's free enterprise or other jurisdictions, other local government jurisdictions get into the market, and quite simply we've missed the opportunity. You know, we're in the market too late. So we've got to be, to me, again, given the growth potential, it's a case of let's take the opportunity as it now exists.
All right, any other councillors at this stage? Going once, going twice. Moving on. Arthur Bridgianus has asked, what happens if the venture goes south and ends up costing the council money? What happens to rates then? If it goes well, how does the rates cap get managed? What guidelines would be introduced in regard to the baseline of rates, garnering if there's a low year? In other words, and he continues on, if the rates get reduced by 10 million, will rates garnered on the ratepayers be reduced accordingly, or would it be a windfall to council's coffers? But let's deal with the first part of his question first. Everyone would, of course, if you went into this, they'd hope that it succeeds, but what does happen if it fails and you do your dough?
Oh, John, I don't mind saying that's the classic nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing ventured, nothing lost. It does not matter what you do, there is an element of risk. And yes, absolutely, we could go into this, and as Councillor Crawford's pointed out, yeah, our investment will be in the millions to start with, but it's not going to be at a level where it's going to be detrimental and have an impact on rates, not at all. Go the other way, for that same investment, if it blossoms, and we anticipate it blossoming, and we actually anchoring ourselves in the market and being able to turn a profit, the return on investment will be far, far greater than the other way, the potential losses, if it went completely south. So yes, you have no illusions, and I hope no one has any illusions. You know, if you're betting on a horse race, not everyone's going to win. Well, and it doesn't matter what venture we get into, anything, we race a waste recovery. You know, you could lose on that. It does not matter what we do. There's always a potential risk. In terms of the impact on rates for any returns that we get, yes, that's all. It'll all go to rates. Won't go to any councillor. Won't go to any shareholder. The idea is it goes to rates.
In order to relieve the pressure of what otherwise are incessant rises right across local government, the demand that local government deliver more with a finite rates base. So this is designed to give you another source of income.
And again, and all councillors will attest to this, everything costs. We have a choice here, and I say this to the community, we have a choice. We can reduce your rates, no worries. Maternal and child health services, they can go. Library services, they can go. We can stop supporting our sporting clubs. Not a worry. You know, we can slow down our capital works program. You know, we don't have to do any repairs to any of the community halls. Slow all that down. That's a way of reducing our expenditure. However, you do that, and it is at our peril. You know, I've been to countries where the roads are potholes. Councillor Hojeda, I think, can speak with some eloquence and authority on that. So we've got a choice. Either we cut or we, and it's three-way. We cut, we go back to the people and say we're going to increase your rates again, or we look at alternatives. And this is an alternative.
All right. I think that was an invitation to you, Councillor Hojeda, if you wanted to join in now, but you don't have to. I'm just offering you the chance.
I don't know if I was ready for it, but happy to say a couple of words, perhaps actually take up a couple of questions that are a bit further up also. But just on that point of Michael's there, I think everyone's well aware of the fact. I think certainly everyone here, certainly all of council and probably all councils in Victoria, likewise, are aware of the fact that rates are by no means a perfect system, to put it politely. The dilemma we have, though, is that neither can council establish a budget entirely for ratepayers only. This is a dilemma because 50% of our population that live and breathe our LGA are not ratepayers. So, of course, the budget has to be considered at a higher sort of social public good level. Obviously, keeping in mind that, ratepayers are putting in a lion's share, not all, but a lion's share of the income. It is an imperfect system. There's no question about that. But we've got to keep in mind that, those library services are for ratepayers. They're also for people who aren't paying rates. We also have, certain restrictions in terms of rates that I would like to see gone, but can't be legally. So, for example, I'd rather that there were higher rates paid by people who don't live in our LGA but have investment properties, so that people who actually live and breathe our LGA, wouldn't have to burden such a big share of the income necessities. So on to the other question, I think it's been posed a couple of times, about the management and so forth and running of the such a business, whether it's this or another business proposition. I can't speak for all councillors, but I have already made it very clear publicly that I certainly am not interested in supporting any business setup where we have to pump in public council monies to set up a business that will then line the pockets of a private enterprise. Not interested in that at all. I'm interested in setting up a business that can show us what you can do with a publicly owned and run enterprise to support back, to bring those gains, those financial gains back into our community 100%. That's what I'm interested in. And I hopefully, if we go down this road, this can be a bit of a model for our council in this regard and for other councils in this regard also. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, John.
Thank you. And I see that Councillor Sarah Carter wants to speak, and I will come to you in a second, but just picking up on a question that's come through as you've been saying that and picking up on what the Mayor said a moment ago. Someone has said that they support the idea, but if the venture's successful, would you sell it off in the future?
No.
And cash in the way, for instance, that the People's Republic of Moreland did with their electricity supply and made a windfall from selling it off?
I don't mind saying, and this is where again the level of alignment with the councillors here is well. Again, I'll let the councillors speak for themselves. No, the city of Footscray, the old city of Footscray, had an electricity company, and a fellow called Jeffrey Kennett made the city of Footscray sell our electricity company to the SEC, and then we were told that they were going to sell off the SEC and we were all going to have cheaper electricity. Well, the selling bit worked really well. The bit that didn't work too good was the cheaper electricity. We've been suffering the ignominy of that as a decision for 2 decades now. No, sorry. That's not going anywhere. It's ours. We'll keep it. It'll be the people's money.
Of course, you can't bind future councils, but that certainly can be part of how you set it up. Councillor Carter, I did notice before and I put you on hold. Can we bring you in now, please?
Thank you so much, and I will be brief. Just building on the comments by the Mayor and by Councillor Hojeda, and I just want to go back to the concerns and questions that were raised by Arthur. just to echo that they're shared by many councillors as well. I seconded this motion. I support the Mayor in looking into this. Michael has certainly put some quite a bit of effort into this and has a knowledge. This is a passion project for him, and he's brought it to council with enough of a compelling case. But I certainly have a lot of questions. And when we talk about risk appetite, there is absolutely an inherent risk. But what I would say is that I probably would be erring on the side of being quite cautious when it comes to this. I have a lot of questions. I expect to see a really robust and vigorous due diligence process. There needs to be governance, mandates in place. I was elected back in 2008, it's quite a while ago now, and we had debt. And a lot of residents will remember we used to put 2% on top of CPI, on top of rates, to make up our backlog. I don't want to go back to those days. I will not sit on council and in good faith approve something where the risk threshold is far too great. So I just want to echo that we are in the very early stages. There are a lot of questions. We share your questions, but the overarching idea, I think, is a good one. I think it's worth exploration, but I just want to give some sense to residents that, it is early on. There are a lot of questions, and we too share. And I want to know, exactly what the risk. I want to know within an inch of as much as we can model it, and all the situations, and looking at worst and best case scenario to make an informed be entering into something like this lightly. It's certainly the Mayor as well, because I know we were both on council in those days when council had debt, and it took a lot of hard work to get out of it. So I just want to make that point abundantly clear.
Thank you. And Councillor Cook-Lamb has also got her hand up, and then we'll go to a question for Professor Efron.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I was hear other councillors said, and I also, wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that what for me is where we have a very comprehensive consultation with the community, particularly about the community with diverse background. So we already have some contact with a number of community leaders and ask them to come to talk to us and meet with them, and they can pass that information around to their community as well. So, I mean, this is not the only forum, and I hope there'll be more people to get involved and give them idea and what they think. And honestly, we will listen what the community said. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Efron. There's a question asking about what's the potential and the demand in Australia at the moment. What are the parameters within which a proposal like this should be seen?
Yeah, I could make 2 or 3 comments, I think, in response to the discussion so far that I think might help the debate. Firstly, so I'm a paediatrician and I do clinical trials. I've been immersed in this space for about 5 years now. It's a pretty crazy industry, and I've had a lot of contact with industry players as well as regulators through the different government channels and so on. And firstly, there's been a comment that, it's better to have Australian product or Victorian product than overseas product. I'll say some things that some people will know if they've done some reading, but there's well over 30 Australian licenses now for growing and producing medicinal cannabis, including quite a few in Victoria. And there's quite a few of these companies. I mean, they raise tens of millions of dollars through venture capitalists. It's a really expensive industry to establish. A lot of people have done a lot of work on the basic agricultural science in this country, following on from work done in Canada and Israel and the United States and other countries. It's a very complicated process to do this well and to grow good quality medicinal grade pharmaceutical products. All the companies in Australia that I've spoken to, there's quite a few, have had significant roadblocks and delays along the way, and it takes a long time before you can get product to market, let alone, and the market is becoming increasingly crowded. So any doctor can prescribe any medicinal cannabis product for any patient at the moment. They just have to apply to get a permit and make a justification to the Therapeutic Goods Administration under something called the Special Access Scheme. And when you do that, you have to, it's different to any other drug, but you have to name the product and the indication and make a justification for it. And month by month, the number of available products to a doctor prescribing in the drop-down boxes, you have to select the product, is growing exponentially. So it's already a really crowded market. There's hundreds of products to choose from. And I think it's important that people in this conversation understand that. It's not as though the market's crying out for new people to provide product. There's plenty of product available already. It's very expensive, and you know, everyone, particularly consumers, hope the costs come down, but that's a difficult thing to achieve because it actually is very expensive to produce this stuff.
Has that been the experience in North America, in Canada, in Western California, and Washington State? I think have gone down this path. Holland, obviously. What's been the experience there?
You mean in terms of cost or the marketplace?
Yeah.
Or the price? Look, I think it's expensive. I don't have a good understanding of that, John. That really, I'm not an authority on that, but I know it's at least moderately expensive anywhere. But there is some variation between countries, I understand, but I'm not an authority on pricing in other countries.
Because, of course, in many of those countries, they've also got now a legalised and regulated recreational marijuana.
Right. Yeah, Canada's a good example, and that changes the whole scene quite dramatically, I think. Yeah.
Yep. And there's a tax revenue there, and governments have pretty much worked out that rather than trying to make money out of running the business, they'll just let other people run the business and tax it. But that's not an option for local government in Australia, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if we go down that path eventually here. But I'm going right off the reservation now. Was that all you wanted to say, Professor Ephron?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions. I guess I'll just say something else that people would know, and that is there is more of medicinal cannabis being prescribed, particularly for adults. I'm a paediatrician. There's not much being prescribed for kids, although that's growing a little bit. But yeah, of course, there's lots of adult conditions for which there's interest in this, and the market will continue to grow. So there's no doubt it's a potentially lucrative market if you can become an important player.
All right. There's lots of questions coming through, and I've kind of lost track. If I don't name the person who sent this, apologies, it's back in the history. There was a question which either Councillor Clarke, Mayor Clarke, or maybe even the acting CEO, Celia Haddock, can answer, which was about collaborating with state government or accessing government grants to limit the risk, the exposure of council funds to establishing a venture like this. Mayor?
Yeah, look, I think the acting CEO can speak to the detail of what the funding streams are from the state government, but there are certainly grant opportunities there that we'd look to tap into as a way of trying to offset any council investment. And just to say, again, so that there's no intrigue, the Premier and the Premier's office are aware of this venture. I spoke directly to the Treasurer about this.
Or after the grand final?
Before the grand final.
Yeah, I don't think he's taking calls for several days after the grand final.
No.
The suggestion he was going to announce a sudden tax on ski chains and ski lodges after the grand final, but it hasn't happened.
I'm not going there. But the Attorney General knows about it, the Minister for Health knows about it, the Minister for Local Government knows about it. So a state government level, everyone is completely au fait with what the strategic intent is of council, what the resolution is going to council, passed by council. So no intrigue there. In fact, the state government were very avant-garde a few years ago in this space. They've tended to hand over their interest to the free enterprise sector, but they're still making grants available. Celia, would you like to speak to the grants opportunities?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, there are federal and state opportunities. Interestingly, the incentives for people is in terms of startups and obviously commercial entities taking on this. So we would be a not-for-profit coming into the industry and wanting to access those funds. So we have had a look. There are some opportunities, particularly in our early stages, and we will be taking those up and talking to the relevant government ministers about that. But I would just stress, as all the councillors have said, this is a not-for-profit venture. So none of the councillors will be driving around in brand new cars or the officers. And so it's a new way for the government to be looking at it as well.
And governance models. So is it even at this very, very early stage? Is it in anybody's mind what sort of a creature it would be that takes on this, that distinguishes between its management on the one hand and the management of the council's other business on the other?
Yeah, I might just come in there that councils under the Local Government Act are allowed to have what's called a controlled entity. So that's like an entity that operates separately to the council but is owned by the council. So a good one that people will know about is Citywide, who you might see picking up waste in the streets. So that is a controlled entity of Melbourne City Council, as is the Victoria Market. Actually, they're both controlled entities of Melbourne. So
but they have independent boards who are appointed by the council to run the business for the council without the individual councillors being involved.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of governance, we haven't had that discussion yet, John. It depends on the model, but we can. I'm just saying we can go down the controlled entity path, and that would probably be one I think the councillors would want to consider.
All right, there's lots more questions. Councillor Bernadette Thomas, so far we've not heard from you. There's no obligation to, but I just thought I'd make you feel welcome in case you wanted to join in, because we've only got another less than 10 minutes. No?
Thanks, John. I think the point that Celia makes, and perhaps Councillor Hawkera, about it being a not-for-profit model is hopefully of interest to people, in that, you know, we're not, as Michael said, we're not kind of aiming to set something up and sell it to the highest bidder. We're aiming, you know, if it goes through, to set something up for the community. So I think that's probably an important point to make, as well as, you know, it's early days, and the feasibility study, you know, we don't have all of these answers to all of the questions. We have the same questions that the community has, but we're hoping that the feasibility study will at least, I guess, give all of us that comfort around the level of risk, and what the next step, what's possible and what the next step will be. So,
all right. Thank you. Question anonymous. The city's very short of open space, and some of the land in the city is contaminated. Is the plan to grow within the boundaries of the council area? And if not, then would the jobs be lost to the city of Maribyrnong? And if it is, then how do you overcome that problem? Mayor.
Yeah, that's all part of the actual business case, John. What we can say is that we won't be encroaching into any of our open space that we need for recreation, as we won't be encroaching. We wouldn't be looking at setting up anything in a residential precinct at all. This is a very prescribed industry. There are a number of ways of growing it: greenhouse, locked facility, completely locked facility, and it's all hydroponic under lights. But again, let's not put the cart before the horse. That will be part of the business case that council would consider. So we're certainly, the no-go areas are obviously open space for recreation. No, we're not going. That's not going to be encroached upon. Growing it anywhere close to residential housing, no, that won't be happening either. We've got ample industrial sites right throughout the municipality. We're very lucky. We were on the precipice some years ago of really flipping much of our industrial land, but we've managed to keep it, and that's been to our advantage.
And there's a question that's highly speculative, but does anyone have any idea about the sort of number of jobs we're talking about? We're talking about a handful of jobs? Are we talking about a huge number of jobs? Is there any indication of the range? Not wanting to pin anybody down at all.
I wouldn't like to actually venture a guess on that, but I'd be hopeful that it would be a growing industry, where, no pun intended there, where even for a relatively in the scale of things, and I take on board what Professor Efron had said about, you know, tens of millions going into you know, some of these companies. We don't need to go down that path, not at all. So we'd actually start small, and we would organically grow the industry. So we'd look to and when I say grow the industry, It's not just a case of physically growing it in terms of its yield capacity, but also its relationships with universities, with academic institutions, with people like Patrick McGorry, for example, having him involved. So the industry, as we would have it, would be growing in a number of areas, and it would take a number of years.
All right, and it's a mix of jobs, as I understand it. Some
Yes.
are highly skilled, and some are just agriculture jobs.
I think the point was well made when someone's saying, "Well, you don't have the expertise." Well, that's right, because it is, as Professor Efron said, that making this stuff, you don't do it in a bucket in the backyard. It is highly technical. You've got to bring in experts, and again, look, this country has lost much of its manufacturing base. This is a very small contribution back into Australia, perhaps getting involved in some local manufacturing. Let's grow some of our technical capability, and let's have something like this underpinned by a strong academic research agenda. It's
Right.
There are a number of wins here.
Running out of time, but there's a question addressing the difference and the distinction between residents and ratepayers, and not all residents are ratepayers. What are the benefits to residents who aren't ratepayers? They don't get any reduction in their rates.
Yeah, well, you might be a renter, and I will defer also to Councillor O'Hara on this. You might be a renter, John, and the rent level that you're currently experiencing isn't just a case of repayment to the bank. It's also at a residential level the council rates that have to be paid, and that's generally by the owner. So if the owner of a property doesn't have to pay out as much for someone who is not a ratepayer, they might not be having to pay as much in rent.
So
Councillor O'Hara. Yes, exactly.
All right.
Councillor O'Hara, did you want to speak to that?
Oh, just to reiterate, I think it's answered effectively by the point I made earlier, which is council only has one budget. There's not one budget for ratepayers and one budget for non-ratepayers. It has one budget, and any gains in that budget will be of assistance or of help for the whole community. It'll mean better library services, better welfare services, support for neighbourhood houses, etc. So it's definitely something that would, if successful, would definitely be spreading the love around.
All right, and before we run out of time, is there any other councillors? We're just about 5 minutes from when we said we'd try to finish. Lots and lots of questions. There's more than 50 questions have come through, but a lot of them are covering ground that other people have covered. So we're not going to go through repeating ourselves. And as I mentioned before, there's an opportunity to continue the discussion after tonight. But just before I throw back to the Mayor for some concluding remarks, are there other councillors who wanted to add something before we're out of time? Anyone at all? No, everybody's very happy. Excellent. Just one final question, if I may, from me. If indeed the community say, no, we're not interested, and through whatever process you come up with, they say, no, we're not interested, would you look at other ventures of a similar kind using this idea, this model? I'm not suggesting council ought to embark into the growing, I think, potentially scandalous world of cryptocurrency, but if there was some other venture of similar financial appeal, does that entrepreneurial zeal and spirit extend beyond a proposal simply for medicinal cannabis?
Yes, it does, John, and I'll be bringing a notice of motion to council next month with another venture that, again, council, whilst I'll be bringing it, all councillors are part of the next proposal. Again, the strategic intent, John, is to come up with an enterprise that will reduce the financial burden on family households. So medicinal cannabis as an opportunity arises because, as I say, it's its growth potential. We're not having to run into competitive neutrality issues with other players who are locals in the industry, as well as it being something that we actually believe in as something that can help assist the health and well-being of the community. This next venture that will come up in October, later this next month, has the same principles at its foundation. And again, we'll go to the community and seek their endorsement and support, because it too, as an enterprise, has not been authorised by the community, and that's what we're about. A transparent and a transparent and engaged council.
Well, the time has flown, so just some concluding remarks, if you could, Mr. Mayor, and then we'll thank everybody for participating and explain how they can continue to contribute after tonight.
Well, firstly, to everyone who's participated, to the community who've come online, thank you all so much. As was said early in the piece by the Acting Chief Executive, Celia Haddock, this is not the only time that you can have your say. We've in fact extended the consultation period, so it will go into early 2022. Please let us know what you think. At the moment, and I have to say, at the moment, of some almost 500 responses that we've received, almost 75% of those responses are saying they support council going to the next stage of developing a business plan that again will be brought to the community. And I just want to say, this will be a gated process. We will not be progressing unless the community gives us their endorsement and authorisation. So even if we get the tick on this, if we go to the business case and the business case falls over, we will not be proceeding. Again, it will be reconciled with the community.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and to all the councillors, thank you very much, and to Acting CEO Celia Haddock. Now, all the questions and answers to them from tonight's very interesting discussion will be available on Your City, Your Voice next week, and everyone who registered will get an email to let them know as soon as those are available, so that you're alerted to the fact that those answers are there. I congratulate the City of Maribyrnong for having the initiative and being bold enough to do what so often councils aren't prepared to do, which is to break out of the narrow confines of the typical roads, rates and rubbish profile that I think limits so much of what we get from this most vital and proximate tier of our three tiers of government system. Democracy in action, it's what everyone says they always want, and that's what we've seen tonight. It's little baby steps, toe in the water stuff so far, and who knows, from the most simple seeds, great trees can grow. We'll see where it goes to. Thank you again for the opportunity. I hope it's been as informative for everybody else as it's been for me. Our thanks again to Professor Efron for giving us his time so generously, which I know is difficult in a busy schedule.
Thank you, Prof.
We'll see where it gets to from here. On behalf of everybody, and thank you for the invitation, have a good evening, and let's see where it goes to next. Good night.